The movie starts at the airport, where a news reporter is reporting about a group of Korean criminals being extracted from the Philippines to Korea. The public is in a state of commotion as they watch the criminals being brought in. In the crowd, a man with glasses seems like he's looking for a particular criminal. Suddenly, he comes out of the crowd and charges at the criminal, who murdered his family. He sets off a bomb, and the explosion results in a catastrophic event that dismembers everyone near the airport entrance. The chaos is immense, with people running and screaming in every direction. The airport becomes a scene of pandemonium, with debris and dust filling the air. 5 years later, in 2022, another group of most wanted Korean criminals is being transported to Korea from the Philippines, but this time, the authorities are using a different plan. To evade any destructive events, they intend to transport the criminals through a cargo ship this time. The cop leader and his team make their way to the cargo port to take the criminals into custody one by one, as they are getting off the prison bus. As the cop leader starts taking records of the criminals, a tattooed criminal named Jong-do, who is convicted of multiple sexual assault offenses, mocks the cop leader by telling him that he has seen the pictures of his daughter, and he'll have his way with her. This triggers the cop leader and he mercilessly beats up Jong-do, taking him into submission. Despite the beating, Jong-do spits blood on the cop leader's face, showing no regret, leading to an even more severe beating by the cop, which ignites one of the other criminals, who start shouting in disapproval of this behavior. But an officer also slaps him for his rebellion, knocking sense into him. Meanwhile, a doctor and a nurse arrive at the scene to accompany the criminals on their deadly journey on the ship. The criminals are currently lined up, waiting to be escorted to the Korean prison facility that's been set up on the ship. The atmosphere is tense as the local cops hand over the operations to an elite commander, who takes charge of overseeing the transportation of the dangerous criminals. As the Korean prisoners are locked up in their cargo cells on the ship, they appear somber and resigned, knowing that they're headed toward a legal trial in Korea. The cop leader takes the time to explain to the prisoners the charges they've been accused of committing, and reassures them that they will be tried under Korean rules and regulations. Despite the seriousness of the situation, the cop leader also maintains a level of control and authority. He informs the prisoners of their amenities, but withholds a toothbrush for their own safety, as these hardened murderers could potentially use them as weapons to harm others. It's clear that he takes the safety of the prisoners, as well as his own team, very seriously. As the ship sets sail toward its destination, tensions run high. The prisoners are left to contemplate their fate, while the cop leader and his team remain vigilant and on guard. The journey will be a long and challenging one, but they all know that they must persevere in order to ensure that justice is served. The ship's captains coordinate the location with the navigation team and continue to start the ship. Moreover, the control center tells the cop leader to keep the transmission and communication open at all times. As the doctor and nurse who work there as volunteers sort out their medical material, the doctor appears to be a little shady, as he puts some injections inside a paper bag and makes his way out, running into the team of cops preparing lunch for the criminals. Acting normally, the doctor heads down into the engine section of the ship with a parcel in his hand. Meanwhile, every system is working perfectly, the ship sets out for its departure, and the elite commander is overseeing and monitoring the successful transportation of the incoming prisoners to the Korean prison facility. On the ship, the cops serve food to the criminals, placing the trays on the criminals' knees. One cop asks Jong-do to fold his knees, but in response, he only wears a weird smile, offending the cop. However, every other criminal is behaving according to the rules, and the cop leader is keeping a close eye on everything. Despite everything going smoothly, there seems to be an underlying tension and a sense of unease on the ship, as if something unexpected is about to happen. As the ship sails on, a crew member named Shady, wearing a black cap, uses pliers to tamper with the doors. He seems to have a hidden agenda. Meanwhile, the doctor heads down to the engine section and meets an underground man, who is monitoring something on the computer. The doctor bribes him with food and is given instructions to proceed quickly with his task. He then approaches a zombie man named Alpha, who was one of the 4 participants in an illegal experiment conducted by Aeon Genetics. The doctor is disgusted to see maggots inside Alpha's smelly mouth, but the other guy tells him to buck up and be a man. The doctor proceeds to inject Alpha's body with a mysterious drug, as instructed. As the ship proceeds to make its way out of the Philippines, a couple of cop assistants joke around with each other to pass the time, while Jong-do watches them with disgust and reveals a pin from inside his mouth, which he uses to unlock his cuffs. He then gives the pin to his cellmate and sits down, acting like he is still tied. Meanwhile, members of the shady crew walk into a place where several guns are stashed. They equip themselves with guns, revealing that they are also criminals who are undercover as crew members. They then walk up to the cops, guns in hand. The cops watch warily as the shady crew members approach. They inquire about the whereabouts of the ammunition in front of them, but their cover is blown when the shady crew members are revealed to be murderers. Without any more time to waste, the shady guy charges in at the cops with a hammer. He brutally hits them on their heads, allowing the blood to gush through their skulls. The other members of the shady crew open fire on the cops, murdering several without mercy. They drag the bodies to a freezer for storage, all the while trying to cover their tracks. The scene is chaotic and violent, with the sound of gunfire echoing through the room. The shady crew members move with precision and efficiency, quickly disposing of any evidence and making sure to leave no trace of their crime. Then, Shady makes his way to the captain's deck and shoots almost everyone, leaving only 2 captains alive. He then destroys the communications and stops the radio, to stop the authorities from tracking the ship's location. Commander notices the disturbance and becomes worried, as his team is not able to connect to the ship's signal. He then instructs his cop team to take immediate action. However, Cop Girl is sitting in her room when she notices that her phone no longer has network signals. Noticing this abnormality, she tries to reach her team through the radio, but still does not get any response, so she leaves one of her assistants in charge of Psycho and another female criminal and goes to meet the other cops, to identify the cause of this issue. Meanwhile, Jong-do and his cellmate trick one of the cops into their cell and brutally murder him. Jong-do starts by biting off the cop's ear, and his cellmate finishes the job by smashing the cop's head with the cuffs. On the other hand, Shady's men continue their attack on the cops, brutally murdering most of them. It becomes apparent that Shady and Jong-do are brothers, and he is here to save his brother. After some greetings, Jong-do asks for a knife and stabs it into the cop's heart, to make sure no life is left in him. Then Jong-do takes out his penis, lighting a cigarette, and starts to pee on one of the dead cops to mark his dominance, like a mad dog. Meanwhile, Cop Girl bumps into the doctor and points her gun at him, but Cop Leader and his assistants show up to clear the confusion. However, the doctor points at one of Shady's men with an axe, so the cops go after him. Shady's team uncuffs all the criminals, setting them free. However, one of the criminals wants to assault Cop Girl, as he finds her cute. Jong-do, taking out a revolver from an officer's corpse, shoots the man down, because he wants Cop Girl's uniformed body all to himself. Jong-do then confronts the criminal Lee, because he is being ungrateful for saving his life. However, Lee simply tells Jong-do to be a good boy and advises him against doing something he'll regret later. Now, the cop leader and his assistants head towards the deck to check on the man with an axe and ask the man to surrender, but instead, he throws the axe at the cop leader, igniting him to engage in a fight. 2 other cops pull out their revolvers, but Shady and his other bullies come out of hiding and fire continuously at the cops, murdering one of their assistants in the process as well. The cops return fire, but the going gets tough. Jong-do changes into his summer clothes to flex his tattooed muscles and moves ahead with his gang, while Lee contemplates all the bodies around him. Cop Girl distracts Shady by shooting his man in the leg, then the cop leader shoots him down. Shady, panicked, takes a captain hostage to try and gain an advantage, and calls out cop leader and his assistant, commanding them to drop their weapons. Just then, though, Cop Girl attacks by jumping on him from the side. A tense sequence follows, but Cop Girl frees herself and Shady is shot down for good. Cop Girl talks to the hostage captain and asks for a way to communicate with others in Korea. He advises her to go to the engine room and use the satellite phone there. The doctor scurries to his room and finds Nurse drinking beer. He locks the door to keep them safe and Nurse proposes trying some hormone yoga. The doctor is clueless and starts talking about his fortune teller, which ruins the mood, and the nurse goes back to drinking. Elsewhere, the underground men continue to monitor the experiment Alpha, but the blood from the bodies stored in the refrigerator somehow travels through the pipes, allowing a few blood drops to fall on Alpha's oxygen mask. This wakes him up, as he starts breathing heavily and removes his oxygen mask. As Jong-do and his gang search for a satellite phone, they make their way to the ship's engine room. They locate some engine workers and Jong-do murders one of them, instilling fear in the others. He threatens the remaining engineers, forcing them to reveal the location of the engine control room. Jong-do sends one of his thugs to cut off the final means of communication with Korea. The thug reaches the control room, brutally murders more workers, and destroys the final communication resource. The authorities are now completely cut off from Korea, leaving the situation on the ship even more dire. Meanwhile, the cop leader and his team make their way through the spilled blood and unite with other cops. They realize that Jong-do planned the takeover beforehand. The cop girl informs the team that the engine room is the only way to alert the authorities, so they head there immediately. In the engine room, the chief engineer bargains for his life, claiming that he is the only one who can keep the ship running. Jong-do and his men find this funny and laugh at him, preparing to stab him. Just as Jong-do is about to penetrate the knife, Lee stops him by holding his hand. At that moment, the cop leader arrives with his team. However, the chief engineer warns against shooting in the engine room. One cop, who is undercover as a thug, tries to run, but a member of the gang shoots him down. The gang plans an attack while the cops move toward them. The gang finds every weapon they can in the engine room and comes face to face with the cops. Jong-do points a knife at the cop leader and tries to slash him, but instead, he gets smacked. The rest of the gang fights the cops, but the cops dominate them. One of the thugs tries to run from the fight and heads upwards, but he is interrupted by Alpha, who kicks him in the chest, sending him flying towards the wall, and the impact smashes the guts out of him. The fight stops and everyone stands still, unaware of Alpha's next move. Alpha is blind, but can see through heat vision and has an acute sense of smell. Alpha gets down the stairs, and one thug tries to attack him with a knife. Alpha dodges it and cuts the thug's throat instead. He then strips out the parts of his body like an animal. Alpha's body is immune to bullets and he has super strength abilities, as he is a genetic experiment. Alpha destroys anyone in his way with his bare hands. One thug with long hair tries to escape, but Alpha catches him by his hair and rips it apart, finally stepping on his face and murdering him. He then gets in a fight with the cop leader, punching him aside. Jong-do tries to escape with his men, finally shooting at Alpha from the top. Even after continuous firing, Alpha remains unhurt. Jong-do and his men make a run for it, but Alpha quickly follows. He slaps one of Jong-do's men so hard that he expires on the spot. Alpha later catches up with Jong-do, who shoots at Alpha, but runs out of bullets. Alpha smashes Jong-do with a hammer, throwing him across the room onto the engine, where his body sticks due to the heat. Alpha then deals another blow, damaging Jong-do's arm, before finally smashing his head like it was never there, and the ship shuts down due to engine failure. Alpha again attacks the cop leader, but this time, Lee starts fighting with him, preventing him from harming the cop leader. During the fight, Lee notices a certain badge number on Alpha's chest. Alpha tries to strangle Lee with his fists, but the cop girl shoots Alpha's arms, allowing Lee to escape. They both run towards the other side of the room, trying to close the door, but Alpha stops it from closing with all his strength. Lee kicks Alpha in the chest, locking him up on the other side of the ship. This gives the team enough time to escape. Among the survivors is an old criminal, who fails to recognize Alpha, even though he's been in prison for 30 years. As the commander in Korea locates the location of the ship, he realizes that the ship has been taken over. The deck is covered in blood, indicating the severity of the situation. Suddenly, the commander receives a call from the main villain, who is enjoying the company of a slave while arguing with the commander about Alpha's situation. The villain reveals that it was their plan all along to capture Alpha and orders the commander to bring Alpha to him at any cost. The commander is angered by this revelation and punches a pole, revealing his super strength, as he is also a genetic experiment. In another part of the ship, Psycho breaks free and uses handcuffs to tie the assistant female cop as her prisoner. As she sits in the toilet, she encounters a group led by a fat criminal named Fatty, and they engage in a conversation. The situation on the ship continues to escalate, and the actions of the characters become more intense as the danger increases. As the survivor team continues on their journey, they suddenly hear a commotion. They quickly investigate and discover that Alpha has broken free and is on a murdering spree. He murders the two remaining captains, who are desperately trying to escape the ship, and then brutally ends the nurse's life by pulling her throat out through the ship's window. The doctor becomes alarmed and manages to escape, but is later captured by Cop Girl. He reveals that he was paid by the Villains Association to give Alpha a power drug, which is responsible for his abilities. The team learns from an old criminal that the association is known for creating such drugs, which can extend life and make the patient 10 years younger, while also giving them superhuman abilities. The doctor spills to the team that some of the drugs are left in the basement. This prompts the cop leader to send his team to the location, but he heads out alone to locate and destroy Alpha. The situation is becoming more tense, as one team is on the lookout for the drug to uncover the truth behind Aeon Genetics and the dangerous superhuman drugs that they are creating, while the cop leader thinks he can defeat the untamed experiment Alpha. Alpha, continuing his bloody rampage, spots Psycho's team entering through an iron door. Using his superhuman strength, he breaks the door, allowing it to land on one of the guards. He then steps on the guard's head, crushing it. Another guard tries to stab him, but nothing happens. Instead, Alpha slaps the guard so hard that he flies into another room. Alpha then murders the assistant cop girl and chops off one more guy's legs before chasing after Psycho and Fatty. The situation becomes chaotic and dangerous, as Alpha relentlessly chases after his victims and the team is desperate to find any means to stop him before he murders everyone on the ship, as he does not have a soul. The survivor team discovers the spot where Alpha broke out and the aftermath of his attack on Psycho's team. They also find secret files revealing that Alpha was born in 1911, and was a prisoner of war on an island where the Japanese conducted twisted experiments on him, inserting the DNA of a wolf into his body and turning him into an alpha monster. Despite the horrific truth they have uncovered, the team knows they must continue their mission to stop Alpha and save the ship at all costs. Psycho and Fatty attempt to escape in a lift, but it's no use, as Alpha jumps on top of it, possibly unable to handle Fatty's weight. He shoots at them while Doctor reads out Alpha's characteristics. We learn that he is 5 times stronger than a normal human being, and reacts strongly to the smell of blood and hormones, due to his prolonged sense of trauma. A flashback takes us to 1943, where Japanese scientists complete their experiment on Alpha in front of an army squad. They seemingly succeed and celebrate their achievement, bowing in front of their superior officers, but something happens, and Alpha starts to shake. He breaks free, slaughtering all of the soldiers and doctors in a brutal fashion. The scene transitions to Alpha in the current day, attacking Psycho and Fatty in the lift. He easily catches Fatty because of his weight, and Psycho tries to save him, but it's no use. The cop leader shows up and takes Psycho away, while Alpha ends Fatty's life in a custom-made style. The lift drops to the ground and has a small explosion, but it does nothing to Alpha. As the survivors try to flee, Commander and his men make it to the ship on a chopper. All the men in the chopper are super soldiers. As Cop Leader and Psycho make their way through the ship, they stumble upon the body freezer. Cop Leader instructs Psycho to hide inside it while he takes on Alpha in a fierce battle. Despite being dominated, Cop Leader never loses hope and manages to bite off Alpha's arm. He celebrates his achievement, before getting murdered by Alpha. Alpha enters the freezer where Psycho is hiding among the bodies. He tries to smell her, but the sound of the chopper distracts him, and he moves away. Psycho seizes the opportunity and makes a run for it. She bumps into Commander and his men and tries to tell them about Alpha, but she rambles, and Commander shoots her down. Cop Girl and the rest of the team arrive, threatening Commander, but he shoots Cop Girl, revealing that he is only on the ship to retrieve Alpha. Lee has had enough and shows off his own powers, dominating the super soldiers. He confronts Commander, and they reveal that they know each other because Lee was also a prisoner of war, like Alpha. A flashback shows how Commander and his men use people like Lee for all kinds of disgusting experiments. Those who perish during the experiments are disposed of, but Lee survived with enhanced powers, causing problems for Commander. In an attempt to tranquilize him, Commander ended up murdering Lee's wife and son. The tension builds as Lee faces off against Commander, while Alpha is also on the loose. Lee attacks Commander, but gets thrown away, as Commander possesses a higher level of super strength. Alpha shows up and takes on the super soldiers, displaying their skills. A powerful encounter follows, where both Lee and Alpha put their skills on display. It comes down to Commander and Alpha, but Commander is more powerful. Meanwhile, Doctor takes Cop Girl's gun and tries to escape into the chopper. Commander dominates Alpha ruthlessly and throws him around. The doctor enters the chopper and threatens the pilot, but he says there's no fuel, leading to a shootout, and everyone perishes inside the chopper. Commander terminates Alpha by smacking him and cutting his ankles, making him bleed out. Lee finishes off the other super soldiers, so the final matchup is between him and Commander. Commander is almost unbeatable, but then he reminds Lee that he murdered his son. It awakens Lee's inner strength, and he begins to dominate Commander. The battle rages on and eventually ends with Lee charging at Commander and taking him down into the ocean with him. Later, Villain enters his superhuman prison and meets a young boy who has inherited superpowers. It is revealed that the High Commander Villain was also in the same prison camp as Alpha, being one of the 4 first experiments, and the young boy is actually Lee's son. It turns out that Commander spared the boy when he realized he had inherited superpowers from Lee. The movie ends with Lee surfacing to the shore, signaling his victory over Commander. He then walks into the wilderness, symbolizing his new beginning.